culture of misogyny does not exist only in the dark corners of the internet or the minds of particularly disturbed individuals. It's actually woven into the fabric of our key institutions. We have reported far too many times in recent months about the unbelievably light punishments given to convicted rapists by judges. There was a Texas judge who in April sentenced a young man to probation after he admitted to raping a girl at school. The judge, a woman, said the 14-year-old victim, quote, wasn't the victim she claimed to be. There was a Delaware judge who sentenced a wealthy man to probation as part of a deal in which he pled guilty to raping his toddler's daughter. The judge, a woman, noted that the rapist would not fare well in prison. And the judge was later defended by Delaware Attorney General Beau Biden, son of Vice President Joe Biden, because it, quote, was not a strong case. But this month, a judge in Indiana sentenced a man convicted of repeatedly drugging and raping his wife to house arrest. At the sentencing, the judge reportedly told the victim she needed to forgive her attacker. Yeah.
All the women at the table are like, oh.
I think everybody at the table.
Deep sigh.
Yeah.
Deep sigh.
Yeah, when it's that institutionalized, when women judges see survivors as somehow complicit in their own victimization.
So we have classes of women within our society upon whom we think that we can and should inflict violence. One of the most disturbing portions of this case for me in terms of Santa Barbara has been the number of people weighing in saying, well, if he had only visited a prostitute, you know, all of those other girls, those pretty blonde girls, those sorority girls would have been saved. As if it's okay to inflict violence upon the bodies of sex workers, the people who are on the margins of society. But no, 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 not those sorority girls. There should be no work out your misogyny over there on the poor, folks of color, the bodies of women of color, the bodies of the sex workers, but not a violence against women is a systematic institutional problem, whether you're wealthy or whether you're poor. And until we can talk about how comprehensive the source of the problem is, we'll continue to say, well, oh, so she was violated, that's okay, but not this person's daughter.
Well, and the wealth and apparent physiological whiteness of the assailant may also be part of the story, in part because we know that these parents, I mean, part of the heartbreak here is that these parents seem to be doing everything that parents could do. Yes. They clearly had alerted the authorities stand there, and then they walk away. And I presume it is in part because he self-presents as what we think not an attacker is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Good guy.
I rewatched a documentary film called Tough Guys 2 by Jackson Katz, executive produced by Sut Jolly. And Jackson Katz in that film does a really, really great job talking about this crisis of white masculinity and this whole notion that these white men are trying to reclaim their masculinity, right, by exerting violence against girls and women as a result of
demographic shifts.
Yeah, demographic shifts, gains in rights that women have acquired over the years from the 1960s and 1970s and beyond. And it also speaks to how white masculinity and white violent masculinity and abusive masculinity gets a pass because of white privilege, the benefits that white men share in being white and male, and therefore no one really has to pay any attention to their violent behavior or attribute individual acts of violence or acts of rape against white men because no one sees this as a collective, action of violence, massive violence.
If I could just add, you know, I teach a class at Vanderbilt called The Politics of Masculinity, and we teach exactly that point. And I think that one of the points that I think people don't realize is that hegemonic constructions, what they're called, of masculinity, are also incredibly bad for men. I mean, you know, men die sooner from all these preventable causes of illness. Trying to be a tough man, you know, you're more likely to die in violence, you die in a car wreck. And so in a way, it's like, you know, men saying, oh, why should I care about this feminist stuff? It's just attack me. It's actually good for your mortality to pay attention to some of these issues, because this prison of the hegemonic construction of idealized masculinity is also very, very bad for men.
So I was thinking that one of the things that ties into everything that everybody has said around the table is that this is really systemic, right? So whether it's the judges who sometimes are women who are letting off these rapists, or whether it's media that have up until this crime looked at misogynistic murders and said, oh, that's not sexist, that's not part of it. that is part of why the police, as you said, the family tried to get help for Elliot Rodger, and they walked away saying he's courteous, he's polite. Part of it is because of this white masculinity and white privilege.
And
entitlement, exactly. And part of it is because media have not given the warning signs to know, right? We need to change these systemic
And the only one other thing I want to add in here is that, so I am in agreement with you around the ways in which both race privilege and gender privilege and class privilege operate for this particular shooter. But I also just want to point out that when we think about the problem, for example, of black male violence, we almost exclusively think about that violence as it is enacted on other black men, primarily through kind of urban street violence. We almost never talk about black male violence vis-a-vis black women's bodies. So, what we know is that all races of people except for Native American women are most likely to be victimized by people within their own racial category, right? Absolutely. So that even as we are trying to do the work within, for example, racial justice, we often are very silent about the ways in which black men's violence vis-a-vis black women's bodies is also part of this story.
Then we have Melissa Alexander being penalized for defending herself, right? That's part of this whole systemic problem. Whether it's masculinity, whether it's race privilege, we need to be making these connections in a writ large kind of way. It's why I'm happy we're having this conversation.
And yet I'm sad about why we have to have this conversation. Thank you to Jen Posner and to Byron Hurt. I hope that you will come back again, although it seems like every time we are together it is behind madness. And also thanks to Jonathan Metzel for being here. Yolanda is going to stick around a little bit longer. Coming up, the First Lady's food fight. First Lady Obama like we have never seen her before. And my remembrances of Dr. Maya Angelou. There is more Nerdland at the top of the hour.